I'd always imagined that if I ever left my job, it would be in a blaze of glory on my terms, with my head held high after I had proven myself beyond doubt. I pictured walking out to applause, my achievements lauded, my loyalty rewarded. But reality doesn't always play by the stories we tell ourselves. The way I actually left Lennox and Co. was nothing like that. And as I look back, I realized I'd been building up to it for a long time without really admitting it to myself. It was an unusually bright Friday morning in Chicago. Sometimes the city likes to trick you, letting in a rare splash of sunlight as if everything is perfectly in order. I stood by the window of my apartment, letting the early light stripe across my hardwood floors. The coffee in my mug was strong, just the way I liked it, just the way I needed it for the kind of week I'd had. I tried to shake off the heaviness that had settled over me these past few months. I was 31, single, and living alone in an apartment I had decorated piece by piece on a modest budget. A blend of thrift store treasures and memories from my travels across America. To anyone else, it would look like a life well put together. On the inside, I felt like I was fraying at the edges. As I made my way to work, the city was already buzzing with energy, taxis honking, people scurrying, vendors setting up on the sidewalks. Lennox and Show sat in the heart of downtown. All sleek lines and glass a testament to what money could buy, and to the kind of world we operated in. I'd been there 5 years, starting as an eager junior analyst, working my way up to senior consultant through sheer hard work and the willingness to take on anything, no matter how difficult. My job was to manage investments, help clients grow their portfolios, and bring in new business. I'd made a name for myself as someone who could handle tough clients and close impossible deals. Inside the office, everything looked the same, yet somehow, I sensed a change. Anna was the first to greet me as always, her blonde hair pulled into a tight ponytail, her bright smile as reliable as sunrise. We'd started at the company at the same time and supported each other through every promotion, setback, and late night. "Morning," she said, handing me a printout I'd need for our morning meeting. Robert, the team's resident cynic, leaned in from his cubicle with his usual smirk. "Ready for another round in the circus?" he joked. I managed a half-hearted laugh. The camaraderie among us was real, but there was always an undercurrent of competition, and lately it felt like that tension was closing in on me. At 10 a.m. sharp, Mr. Jameson, our manager, called the entire department into the main conference room. The glass walls, meant to symbolize transparency, somehow made me feel even more exposed. He was in his mid-50s, always in a crisp navy suit, with a voice that could sell ice to the Arctic. "We have an announcement," he said, trying to inject enthusiasm. I glanced at Anna, and she just shrugged, as confused as I was. There were rumors of a big promotion coming. For months, I had stayed late, volunteered for every extra project, and taken on the most challenging accounts. I'd landed the Kensington and Marcha $1.2 million win for the firm. That alone should have sealed it. I'd done everything right, hadn't I? My heart pounded as Mr. Jameson spoke, running through a list of accomplishments for the role. For a brief, flickering moment, I let myself believe it was going to be me. "And so," he continued, "we're pleased to announce that the new associate director will be Claire Watkins." I felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. Claire? Claire was competent, sure, but she'd only been with the company for 2 years. She did her work, but she never went above and beyond. I looked at Anna, whose jaw nearly dropped. Even Robert seemed stunned. But Mr. Jameson carried on, undeterred. "She's been a real team player," he said, as if that explained everything. The phrase hit me like an insult. I remembered every late night, every missed holiday, every moment I'd put my own life on hold for the sake of this job. None of it mattered. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, a mix of humiliation and anger. I couldn't bear to sit there another second. Without a word, I stood up, grabbed my folder, and walked straight out of the conference room. Anna's sympathetic glance followed me, but I didn't look back. I went to my office, hands shaking just a little. It felt like everyone's eyes were on me, but I didn't care anymore. From the bottom drawer of my desk, I pulled out a white envelope. I'd written my resignation letter months ago in a fit of frustration, never really expecting to use it. I read it over quickly, made a small correction to the date, and signed it. It was strange how calm I felt as I slipped it into the envelope. I marched to Mr. Jameson's office and found him alone, still beaming after his announcement.
He looked up, startled. "Is everything all right?" he asked, clearly expecting me to congratulate Claire, or at the very least pretend everything was fine. I handed him the envelope.
Thanks for showing me exactly what I needed to know, I said, keeping my voice steady and my eyes on his. He opened the envelope, his expression shifting as he realized what it was. For a split second he tried to keep his smile, but I watched it fade. His cheeks flushed a deep red as he read the letter. "You're quitting?" he sputtered, incredulous. "That's right," I replied, already turning to leave. "You won't have to worry about me not being a team player anymore." I placed my keycard on his desk. I didn't wait for a response. The sense of relief was immediate, sharp, electric, and real. The elevator ride down felt surreal. As I stepped outside, the noise of the city washed over me. Chicago was still shining, the world carrying on as if nothing had happened. But for me, everything had changed. I felt both empty and free, scared, yes, but also certain that walking away was the best thing I could have done. I didn't know what would come next. All I knew was that this chapter was over, and I was finally ready to write a new one on my terms. The first week after quitting my job felt like walking through a fog that wouldn't lift. I drifted around my apartment in Chicago, trying to shake off the feeling that I was suddenly weightless, unanchored. For days, I barely changed out of my pajamas. The television played a steady stream of old black and white movies: Cary Grant, Audrey Hepburn, all those confident voices from another era. I let the dialogue fill the rooms so I wouldn't have to listen to my thoughts echoing back at me. Mostly, I ordered greasy takeout pizza, fried rice, things I hadn't let myself eat in months. I watched the sunlight creep across my living room wall and thought about the 5 years I'd spent in this city. In that glass and steel office, always trying to do what was expected. The echo of Mr. Jameson's words and the humiliation of being passed over haunted me every time the phone rang or my email pinged with messages from old coworkers. I didn't answer any of them. For a few days, the emptiness was all I had. But then something inside me shifted. Maybe it was the realization that I was free. No more client meetings, no more late-night emails, no more putting my heart into a job that only saw me as a piece on a board. My savings, about $18,000, offered me a small cushion, a little breathing room. Not enough to retire, not by a long shot, but enough to imagine a new life. One gray afternoon, while scrolling through real estate listings online, I stumbled on a house that seemed to leap off the screen. It was in Asheville, North Carolina, a city I had visited once on a weekend trip, years ago, and always remembered for its rolling green hills and its gentle, artsy spirit. The house was small, white, with blue shutters and a porch that wrapped around the front like a friendly arm. The price was $120,000. I did the math. If I sold my Chicago apartment and dipped into my savings, I could just about swing it. I'd always dreamed of having a place where I could hear birds in the morning instead of sirens, where the air didn't taste like exhaust. I called the realtor, a woman named Suzanne, who spoke with the slow, melodic drawl of the South. She answered my questions with patience and warmth, sending extra photos and telling me about the maple tree in the backyard, the creaky floors, the neighborhood that still had folks who baked cookies for new arrivals. Her kindness made the idea feel less like running away and more like running towards something. That night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I felt hope flicker for the first time in months. The next few weeks were a blur of packing boxes, selling off furniture, and saying goodbye to a city that never really felt like home. Anna came by to help me wrap dishes and told me she was secretly proud of me. "You're braver than you think, you know," she said, hugging me at the door. Robert dropped off a bottle of wine and a note that read, "Go where you're valued." For the first time, I realized how much of my life in Chicago had been about pleasing other people. Now it was about listening to myself. I loaded my car with suitcases and a few precious keepsakes: my mother's old lamp, a stack of journals, a faded photograph of my parents on their wedding day. The morning I left, I stood in my empty apartment, the hardwood floors echoing under my feet, and let myself grieve the old chapter. But as I drove out of the city, the buildings shrinking behind me, I felt something close to relief. The drive south was long, but each mile seemed to peel away the layers of stress I'd been carrying. I watched the landscape change from gray city blocks to rolling hills and open sky. Somewhere in Kentucky, I stopped for gas and chatted with an older couple who were heading to visit their grandchildren. "You'll love Asheville," the woman told me. "It's got good people." I wanted to believe her. When I finally arrived, the house looked just like the photos, even better, really. The paint was chipped in places, and the garden was wild with daisies and tall grass, but the place felt alive. I stood on the porch, feeling the wooden boards give a little under my weight, and took a deep breath. The air was fresh, tinged with the smell of pine and distant rain. For the first time in ages, I didn't hear the constant hum of traffic, just the distant call of a bird and the gentle rustle of leaves. The realtor, Suzanne, met me at the front door with a big smile and a set of keys. "Welcome home, Lauren," she said, her eyes kind and warm. I thanked her, my hands trembling as I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The floors creaked under my boots, and sunlight spilled across the living room in wide golden bars. I wandered from room to room, touching the walls, the window frames, the old-fashioned kitchen counter. It was smaller than my Chicago apartment, and nothing matched, but it felt right. It felt like mine. I spent the next few days unpacking, scrubbing floors, and hanging up pictures. The first night I slept with the windows open, listening to the rain tapping gently on the roof, feeling at peace for the first time in years. On the third day, I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find a couple about my age, Helen and Mark, standing on the porch with a basket of muffins. "We just wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood," Helen said, her voice bright and friendly. Mark gave me a quick shy wave. I invited them in, and soon we were sitting at my tiny kitchen table, drinking coffee and sharing stories. They told me about the neighborhood, the annual block party, and the little bookstore on the corner that sometimes hosted poetry readings. Helen laughed easily, and Mark had a quiet kindness that made me feel safe. After they left, I sat on the porch, the sky streaked with orange and pink, and realized that for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel out of place. I belonged here, not just in this house, but in this life I was beginning to build for myself. I didn't know what the future would bring, but I was finally ready to find out. Starting over was a lot harder than I'd imagined on those restless nights in Chicago, when all I wanted was to escape. I thought the hard part was leaving my old life behind. But it turned out that beginning from nothing but a fresh address and a key in my hand, was an entirely different challenge. The first few weeks in Asheville passed in a slow, gentle rhythm. At sunrise, I would sit on my porch with a cup of strong coffee, watching the mist roll off the hills behind my house. The birdsong was gentle and unfamiliar, a kind of music I had never noticed in the city. There were no car horns, no echoing sirens, just the steady hum of insects and the whisper of wind through pine trees. It should have been peaceful, and it was, in a way, but I also felt the ache of loneliness. The silence ringing in my ears after years of living among the constant thrum of people. Money was tight, tighter than I'd admitted to anyone back in Chicago. After buying the house and paying for the move, my savings were shrinking faster than I'd expected. I was careful with every dollar. I started keeping a notebook of every expense, groceries, utilities, even the rare coffee out in town. I stopped eating out and learned to cook simple meals, omelets, roasted vegetables, big pots of soup that would last all week. The fancy lattes and takeout dinners of my old life disappeared. Sometimes I missed the convenience, but there was something quietly satisfying about making a meal with my own hands, eating it at my kitchen table. Still, I knew I needed to figure out how to support myself in this new place. I'd left Lennox and Shaw, with years of experience in finance, investments, and helping clients organize their futures. I wondered if I could use those skills to build something of my own, something that belonged to me, not a company or a boss who didn't know my worth. The idea of starting my own consulting business both thrilled and terrified me. Could I do it? Would anyone in this small, friendly town trust a newcomer with their money? I started slow. I printed flyers at the local print shop, simple black and white sheets with my name, my credentials, and a short description: financial consulting, investments, retirement planning, small business guidance, honest advice for your future. I felt a little embarrassed handing them out, but the barista at the coffee shop on Main Street let me leave a stack by the register. I tacked a few on community boards at the grocery store and library, heart pounding as I did it, feeling exposed but determined. My first client came a week later. Mr. Graham was a retired school principal with a kind, weathered face and a handshake that reminded me of my grandfather's. He had a tidy nest egg but wasn't sure how to make it last. We met in his sunroom over mugs of black coffee. I listened to his worries about medical bills, his hopes for helping his grandchildren through college. Using what I learned at Lennox & Co., I put together a plan, simple and practical, focused on security and peace of mind. When I showed him my work, he smiled and squeezed my hand. "You're the first person who ever made this make sense to me," he said. That small success gave me courage. Soon, there was Denise, a young woman who'd just inherited a little money from her grandmother and dreamed of opening a bakery. She was creative, energetic, and completely overwhelmed by spreadsheets. I helped her set up a budget, price her goods, and find a space to rent. Denise reminded me of myself, so hopeful, a little scared, but determined to try. I spent afternoons at her rented storefront, helping her paint walls and assemble shelves, and I felt a surge of pride the day she opened her doors to the public. I'll admit, there were nights when I worried. Some months I barely broke even. I watched every dollar and learned new skills out of necessity. When my bathroom faucet started leaking, I watched YouTube videos and fixed it myself, cursing and laughing at my clumsy hands but refusing to pay a plumber. I cut my hair in the mirror badly at first, but I got better. I even took in some bookkeeping work for the bookstore on the corner, just to make ends meet. What I hadn't expected, though, was how much I would come to love the slower pace, the small victories. Each time a client thanked me, I felt a deep pride I'd never known in Chicago, where I was just another name in a spreadsheet, another number in a profit report. Here, my work mattered, even if it didn't pay six figures. Helen and Mark became real friends. We spent long evenings on their porch, drinking iced tea in the summer or hot cider as the air turned cold. We talked about everything: life, work, memories, regrets. I told them about my old life in Chicago, the late nights, the pressure, the day I finally stood up for myself in Mr. Jameson's office. They listened without judgment, and I found myself telling them things I'd never said out loud before. Sometimes, Mark would share stories about his struggles after being laid off from his job in Ohio, and Helen would talk about the art classes she took when she felt lost. We'd laugh about our mistakes, celebrate our small wins, and keep each other company when the world felt a little too big. One night, after Denise's bakery held its grand opening, the three of us walked there together. The place was packed, people from all over town buying cupcakes and bread, laughter spilling out onto the street. Denise caught my eye and waved. Her face flushed with pride. I realized that, in my small way, I had helped someone else's dream come true. The sense of purpose was unlike anything I'd ever felt in my old life. Little by little, Asheville became home. The neighbors waved when I walked by, the cashiers at the grocery store remembered my name, and even my little house, still imperfect, still full of quirks, felt more and more like my own. I found peace in routines: Sunday mornings at the farmer's market, evenings lost in books from the local shop, quiet nights when the only sound was rain tapping the windows. I was still rebuilding, still learning who I was outside of that old office and those old expectations. But for the first time, I felt the freedom to create a life that fit me, a life built on kindness, courage, and the willingness to start again. One year after I left Chicago, I found myself standing in the middle of my living room in Asheville, North Carolina, sunlight pouring in through windows I'd cleaned myself. The old creaky floors, once a reminder of everything new and unfamiliar, now felt like an old friend, groaning and settling beneath my bare feet. I could hardly recognize the woman I was just 12 months ago, the one who sat paralyzed in her apartment, eating cold pizza and watching reruns to drown out the sound of her disappointment. Now, as I sipped my coffee and glanced at the stack of client folders on my desk, I felt a sense of pride I'd never known before. My consulting business had grown in ways I never expected. At first, every new client felt like a small miracle, a confirmation that I wasn't foolish for believing in myself. But little by little, those miracles became routine. The referrals came quietly. At first, a grateful thank you from Mr. Graham led to his brother calling for help with retirement planning. Denise's bakery, now a local favorite, sent her friends my way when they wanted to launch their side hustles. My reputation grew as someone who could be trusted, who listened, and who offered more than just numbers and spreadsheets. I gave my clients peace of mind, and in return they gave me purpose. The turning point came in spring, when a young tech entrepreneur from Charlotte, Evan Hayes, called to ask if I'd be willing to consult for his startup. He'd heard about me from a friend of a network I'd built from scratch. At first, I hesitated. Charlotte was a big city, a different world from the slow comfort of Asheville. But Evan was persistent, promising that the contract would only require a few days of travel each month. After one long conversation about his plans and dreams, I agreed. The deal was for $15,000, my biggest contract yet. When I hung up the phone that day, I sat in stunned silence, the number echoing in my head. For the first time, I realized that my business wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. I could afford new furniture for the living room, finally replace the leaky kitchen faucet, and even set aside money for travel. Most importantly, I had built something entirely on my terms, out of courage and stubbornness and hope. With the business stable, I found myself settling deeper into life in Asheville. The community had wrapped itself around me like a quilt. Helen and Mark, my first friends here, were now regular fixtures in my days. We started a tradition of Sunday dinners on my porch, trading stories and recipes as the sky turned pink above the hills. We even took day trips together, driving out to the Blue Ridge Parkway to watch the leaves turn in autumn, or picnicking by the river on lazy summer afternoons. Helen taught me how to paint wildflowers, dabbing colors onto canvas with a laugh, insisting that anyone could be an artist if they tried. Mark helped me plant a vegetable garden behind my house, rows of tomatoes, squash, and herbs that flourished in the southern sun. I never thought I'd have the patience for gardening, but something was soothing about digging in the earth, watching new life unfold from a handful of seeds. Evenings were my favorite time. I would sit on my porch with a glass of wine, a book on my lap, and listen to the gentle murmur of crickets. The world slowed down here. Sometimes I would let my thoughts wander back to Chicago, not with regret, but with gratitude. Every hardship, every disappointment had pushed me closer to this life, this peace. Then, one sunny afternoon in late June, my phone rang with a familiar name, Anna. I hadn't heard from her in almost a year. My heart skipped as I answered, unsure what to expect. Her voice, warm and teasing as always, brought a rush of old memories. "Lauren, I hope you haven't forgotten about me," she laughed. "I finally left Lennox & Co. I couldn't take it anymore. Jameson promoted Claire again. Can you believe it?" I found myself laughing too, the old bitterness softened by time. We talked for hours, reminiscing about late nights at the office, ridiculous deadlines, inside jokes, and small triumphs. Anna told me she was thinking of starting her own business, inspired by what she'd heard about my new life. "You're proof it can be done," she said. "That we're not stuck. I'm ready to bet on myself now." As we hung up, I felt a deep sense of closure. Anna's call reminded me that I wasn't just building a life for myself. I was creating a path for others to believe in their possibilities. The chain reaction of courage didn't stop with me. It struck me then how much America had changed for me in the past year. It wasn't just a place on a map anymore. It was a country of second chances, of reinvention, where a person could lose everything, a job, a city, an old sense of self, and find not only a way to start over, but also the space to become someone new. My little house with its creaky floors and sun-washed windows was a testament to that promise. It was proof that homes aren't just made from wood and paint, but from every small choice, every leap of faith, every risk taken for the sake of hope. Helen, Mark, Anna, they reminded me that real friendship endures across miles and years. I had found a community that saw me for who I was, not just what I could do. Even old wounds could heal, given time and kindness. Sometimes I would walk through the rooms of my house and run my hands along the walls, remembering how lost I'd felt that first day. Now each space told a story: late night talks with friends, the thrill of signing a new client, quiet mornings filled with light and gratitude. My heart was no longer heavy with disappointment, but buoyant with possibility. Looking back, I knew that quitting was the best decision I ever made. Not just for the money or the peace, or even the newfound confidence. It was about writing my own story, about finally listening to that small, persistent voice inside me that whispered, "You can do this. You can build a life you love." And so I did. And I wouldn't trade a single moment, the fear, the risk, the heartbreak for anything else. My story wasn't perfect, but it was finally beautifully my own.